All right. How's everybody doing? um, Sorry about that, guys. I'm not ready for this. My name's Derek, and you're listening or tuning in to the Fragrant Mind podcast. Today we have an interesting episode. So, as you can tell from the thumbnail or whatever promotion you guys saw this on, or you didn't see a promotion, you're just tuning in. This is just going to be me today, guys. We're not bringing on a guest. We're not doing a topic such as really, talking sense or anything like that. What is going on with this thing? This thing's being all weird and wonky. Being all weird. I don't know. Well, anyway, so let's just get into it. So, if you guys didn't catch the last episode, it was a really important episode for me, not just for myself, but for really a fragrant state of mind. Of course, the A Fragrant Mind podcast, and just the story of how all of this came to be. And bringing Maddie on was really vital to telling the story. Also, coming to terms with, just the roots of all of this. It's interesting how when you look back at your past and where things are and where things came from, usually it's never linear. And also, it's typically some kind of, just challenging, difficult, sometimes even dark, kind of journey that leads us to where we are currently. And the reason I'm doing these episodes is to sort of listen. My goal with all of this is full transparency, to create a safe space of trust and also transparency and honesty and open communication with everybody that joins, our community, our family. And, the reason we have the influencers on and soon we'll have perfumers on, and we're going to have all of these industry insiders. I really want to break the lid off of this whole thing and just create a place of transparency and honesty for all involved. You know what I mean? Because I think there seems to be a lot of just mistrust nowadays, not just in the perfume industry, but in society in general, on social media in general. And, we're trying to break down them walls, you know what I mean? And so we're going to do that. And this episode is super important. Today, I'm going to be talking about how I became Fragrant Derek, not just started making content, but where the roots of my passion for fragrance, my passion for creativity and creative avenues, whether it be music or fragrance or food, it's all tied, it's interconnected. And it all started with one place. And that place for me is New Orleans, Louisiana. That is the epicenter of everything. And if you have been following my content, I talk a lot about New Orleans and the deep history that it has with me and the connections and everything. But there's a lot more to it, and I really wanted to be able to share it with all of you guys today. So we're going to get into that. And honestly, this is going to be difficult for me because I've never done one of these episodes by myself. I've always had a guest. And also, I am bearing myself 100% in this episode. And I'm going to be talking about some things that may be difficult, may be challenging. So full disclosure, if you guys have a hard time with tragic stories, with traumatic events, you guys may want to click off now. Just to, not interrupt your peace of mind. But if you're curious about this story, and I think it can also help you as it helped me. So if you're interested in listening to this, then continue to listen and stay on the Fragrant Mind podcast. Let's get into it.
Welcome to a Fragrant Mind podcast, the ultimate fraghead show featuring Fragrant Derek.
Look good, feel good, smell good.
All right, so we are streaming on Spotify as well as on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And these clips do go up on TikTok as well. But I'm going to be editing some things out in the TikTok stuff because they don't allow certain things on TikTok, and they do allow other things on YouTube and Spotify. So that being said, yeah. Little something that not a lot of people know. I do vape, okay? I smoked from the age of 13 until just a year ago, really. And I was a heavy smoker. I smoked Camel Lights pretty much 90% of the time. Early on, I was into Marlboro Menthol Lights for some reason. And then I got into Camel Lights, and I was at 2 packs a day at my peak. And I was a full-blown cigarette addict. And when I quit, I said, I got to do something to make myself get off the cigarettes. And vaping seemed like a good option. Now, mind you, vaping is, if you've never smoked before, do not get into this. Addiction is never good, okay? Period. Addiction is never good. But if you're a heavy smoker like I was, this can be a saving grace for you. Once again, consult your doctor or something. I don't know. I'm just going to free myself of any liability here. I'm not telling you to vape at all, and I'm not saying it's a safe option. What I'm saying is it helped me. That's all I'm saying. My personal experience. Anyway, so I need this right now, and I also need my liquid gold right now because, honestly, this is going to be a hard story to tell, and it's something that is sort of challenging for me. And I don't talk about this often. I don't tell this story often. I think I've maybe told it 3 or 4 times in the last, 20 years. And so it's not an easy topic to discuss. And that topic is my experience in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, which, mind you, seems to be pretty void on the internet nowadays. No one's really talking about Hurricane Katrina or the events that took place over that couple-week period. And I don't know why. Because for people in New Orleans, it's something that is still so real to them, and it still affects them even 20 years later. And it was a tragic event, and it also, I think, opened the curtain to a lot of the things that are still affecting us today when it comes to the United States government, its ineffectiveness as a governmental entity of protecting its citizens and keeping us safe and giving us security and all of that. I think that was sort of the first event in our history where we realized how completely useless the government is. And I'll get into that now. But anyway. So, how did I end up in New Orleans? Well, I was born in Jefferson Parish, a.k.a. Metairie, Louisiana. So I was born in Metairie, Louisiana, okay? And my family had a long history in New Orleans. My great-grandmother came from Mexico in a city called Piedras Negras. And my grandfather was Creole. And he was a police officer. And at one point, I believe he owned a gas station or something. And but when he died, he was a New Orleans police. He worked for the New Orleans Police Department, and I believe he rode a motorcycle for them. He died having a heart attack while driving, I believe is the story that I was told. Anyway, so I was born in New Orleans. My mom, my biological father, was from Morocco, and but he was actually from Morocco by way of Israel. He was a Moroccan Jew, and yeah, knocked my mom up, and I guess he wasn't the greatest guy, and he ended up getting deported, and yeah, didn't know him growing up, didn't have any connection with him. I grew up with my mom and my dad, who was really technically my stepdad, but he wasn't something that I considered a stepdad. And he was from New England, so we moved up to Massachusetts, and I grew up in a little city called Haverhill, Massachusetts, home of Rob Zombie and many others. Anyway, so I grew up in New England, and a lot of stuff happened in my childhood. I think I'll get into another episode talking about all that. But anyway, fast forward, 18 years old, just got out of high school, and trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I came up with this crazy idea that I was going to go to New Orleans, stay with my grandmother, and learn to be a chef. And that's what I did. I got in my Ford Taurus and drove. Someone's here, and I don't know who. I'm going to have to stop this. Okay, bye. All right, we're back. So listen, I apologize for that. That was an interruption. That's the downside of, filming from home, unfortunately. You know what I mean? That's the downside of filming from home. People are going to ring my doorbell, and my dog's going to freak out and cause a bunch of noise, and I have to stop what I'm doing. Even though I tell everyone to call me ahead of time, whatever. All right, anyway. So back into it. I forgot where I was. But anyway, so I came up with this genius idea, this genius plan. By the way, what's going on with my headphones? I don't know. This connection stinks. Okay, that's good enough. I don't care. All right, so I go to New Orleans. Yeah. So I go to New Orleans, stay with my grandmother, drove all the way, spent like 3 days driving, slept in my car on the way because I couldn't afford a hotel. Get to New Orleans and move in with my grandmother. And it was an adjustment, being in New Orleans. I mean, mind you, I had visited New Orleans many times throughout my childhood, but never, lived there permanently. So, I go to New Orleans, and of course, New Orleans is amazing. Vibrant culture, Southern hospitality, incredible food, incredible just culture, art, just everything from the paranormal to the artistry to the culinary to the music to the nightlife to just the down home sort of scene. It's an amazing place, but it's also a very seedy place. You know what I mean? Like New Orleans was sort of a dark. It had a dark underbelly. It wasn't even, I wouldn't even call it an underbelly. It was pretty much the belly hung out below it hung out over the belt because like you'd go there and you could just tell like there were just some neighborhoods were just pretty rough. You know what I mean? And it was just a really, it was weird. You'd have like a really nice neighborhood right next smack dab next to like a crack house, and there'd be prostitutes on the corners and just people openly carrying, guns and things like that. It was a pretty seedy place. Motels would have like signs that say like, oh, come stay $9 for an hour, come rent a room, and so it wasn't, it was, yeah, like I said, you've got the amazing side of New Orleans. And then of course you had just the debauchery. And that was different for me because I was a young kid. I was only like 18, 19 years old. And, it was really new for me. But anyway, so fast forward a couple of years, I had done a bunch of stuff, was studying, I was working at some restaurants and learning to be a chef. Worked for this little startup restaurant called Raising Cane's, opening their second location, and was on the crew that we were fast tracking, opening 5 more locations at the time. I think at the time there were only 2 locations when I started there. And then, cool story actually. Todd Graves, the owner of Raising Cane's, rented out the Baton Rouge Zoo for all the employees, which at the time I think there were like maybe 80 employees in total, and had a Rage Against the Machine cover band, had an all-you-can-eat crawfish boil, and we were dipping crawfish in Raising Cane sauce. It was pretty dope. And basically, we had free reign at the zoo for the day, so that was pretty cool. We got to just walk around the zoo, like 80 of us, without interruption or little kids running around or anything. It was pretty cool. By the way, Raising Cane's culture is dope. You know what I mean? Like, really cool. Back then, at least. I don't know how it is now, but back then, they really, wanted to instill like a different kind of employee culture. It was really cool. I really liked them. But anyway, and then I worked for a company called, ironically, I work for a restaurant called Copeland's, right? Copeland's was sort of like this, fine dining. I wouldn't call it fine dining. It was like a, upscale family restaurant, New Orleans style cuisine. Ironically enough, it was owned by Al Copeland, who was the creator of Popeye's Fried Chicken. So not only was I a part of the Popeyes, origins, but I was also a part of the Raising Cane's origins. So that was kind of cool. And then also, I went on to work at Commander's Palace for a little while, and also a person who started off in New England, ended up in New Orleans to studying to be a chef, was a certain person called Emeril Lagasse, who came from Fall River, Massachusetts, and ended up in New Orleans at Commander's, and that was his trajectory. So me coming from New England, going to New Orleans and studying, felt like I was following that sort of same path as Emeril Lagasse. I went on to have a 16-year career as a chef, and that was super special. But anyway, back to the story. So I'm in New Orleans, and man, anyway, fast forward. I had gotten kind of, mixed up in a lot of things, mixed up in drinking and the drugs and the nightlife and not sleeping and the uppers and all that kind of thing. And, I was partying pretty heavy, got into band for a while, was in a band, playing some shows, stuff like that, doing like hip hop and metal, fusion, that whole thing that was popular back in the day. And, anyway, so one night I'm at a bar, and they had been, that year we had already had like 3 or 4 hurricane warnings, major hurricane warnings, where, they would say, hey, we're going to evacuate the city. Of course, no one would leave, and then it would just blow over. Nothing would happen. So by the time Katrina came, we had already had like 4 major hurricane warnings that year. So we were all pretty confident that like either it would blow past us or it would just be like a little thing and we just, move on. Mind you, for the last like previous 15 years or even more maybe, every hurricane warning, would come with the same story. This is the one for the century, and then it would either blow over or we'd get some rain, some light flooding, and then it would be over. And so I think a lot of people, when they talk about, oh, why didn't people evacuate? It's like, well, if you lived in New Orleans or if you live in the South, hurricane season is just literally one warning after the next warning after the next warning. And you can never really tell which one's really going to be the one that actually does you in, And matter of fact, we didn't know until literally hours before it hit that it was like really happening. It was really that close because it sort of started to veer and then it kind of came back and then it was veering again. And so it was not something that, it was like we weren't worried. And then when we were worried, it was already kind of too late because at that point, you've got, mind you, there's literally like 2 highways out of New Orleans. That's it. There's 2 exits out of the city. And both of those highways were basically backed up. By the time people were ready to roll out, you couldn't get out of the city. If you were basically going to be stuck on the highway through the storm, and nobody wanted to be there. So anyway, So on my grandma, I decided I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna get out of the city. We're gonna go to Texas. Me and a friend of mine. We're gonna head up to Texas and get the hell out of Dodge. And my grandmother says, "Hey, well, I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna, I've gone through all these storms. I'm gonna stick. I'm gonna stick it out." And I said, so I call my mom and I'm like, "Mom, Grandma wants to stay. She wants to stay through the storm." And she's like, "Well, if your grandmother stays, you have to stay with her. She needs you to stay with her." So I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea, Mom. She's like, "No, you definitely need to stay with her." So, and her reasoning was, well, your Aunt Sandra has a apartment up in this giant warehouse old building called the American Can Company, and it's the safest place in the city. That's what everyone thought. It's the safest place in the city. Plus, it's in the mid city, which, mind you, every time it would storm, mid city never got flooded, so it seemed like a safe bet to be there. So we drove down to Mid City, went to American Can Company, and that's where we hunkered down for the storm. Also, on a side note, I had my little car that I drove down to New Orleans, my little Ford Taurus. My brakes were no good, so and I had to get it from A to B, right? So I had no brakes. They went out on the way to the American Can Company where we're going to hunker down for the storm. So literally the whole way we're driving to my aunt's house. My cousin is in front of me in his car, and every time we'd have to stop at the end of a road or something, I would literally just bump into him, right? Like, 'cause I couldn't stop, so we would just bump into him, no brakes. So we get to the American Can Company. Of course, I park my car off-street parking because the garages are all full. The parking lots are all full, so I had nowhere else to park but off-street parking. So we go in, we hunker down. We've got some food supplies and candles and stuff. And we basically had a little party that night, watched the news. And then they said, "Hey, listen, you guys have to, we're going to go in the hallways. And that's going to be the safest place to be, is in the hallways during the storm." And then nighttime came, and 8 or 9 o'clock, the winds start. And it started off just like any other storm, just heavy rain, a lot of wind. And then all of a sudden, it was like a giant monster tearing through the city streets. It was like a beast. It was like, imagine a tornado tipped sideways, tearing through in between the buildings, picking up street signs and tossing cars from one place to another, trees being rooted out of the ground. It was insane. Absolutely insane. At one point, I went and stood outside just to see if I could, if I'd get tossed away. It got so strong I had to literally go inside, because if I stayed outside, I wouldn't have survived. It was insane. But we went to sleep eventually, and we woke up in the morning. It was over. The storm had torn through the city. And it had done its damage. It did a lot of damage. But in the morning, there was no flooding. There was no water buildup or anything. And so, there was a lot of little water, maybe like 2 or 3 inches of water, but nothing major. And then, so then we're like, okay, well, now we just wait for, because we had no power, obviously. We had no running water, things like that. And so we're like, okay, now the National Guard's going to come in, and we'll have resources and things like that. Everything's going to be good. So we're just waiting. A few hours go by. I go outside, and I look at the 2 to 3 inches of water, and I notice it looks a little higher than it did earlier. So I I went inside and I grabbed a marker, like a little Sharpie marker, and I marked the sidewalk. 20 minutes later, I go outside and my mark is now gone. So I says to my grandmother, I said, Grandma, I think the water's rising. And she's like, no, that's crazy. She's like, there's no way the water's rising. And then all of a sudden, we're looking out in the distance and you can see there's fires out in the distance. And then all of a sudden you hear this loud. And about 30 minutes later, we had 8 feet of water. It just rushed in. And what that loud was, who knows, right? Because what they're saying is the storm destroyed the levees, right? That's the story that we're all told, that the storm destroyed the levees. Except when we woke up in the morning after the storm was done, there wasn't any water in the city, man. There wasn't really any water. But it wasn't until that sound, that's when the water came in. Take from that what you will. I don't know. I'm not here to give any conspiracy theories or anything. Yeah, that's what happened. Anyway, so at one point, I swim out to my car and I stood on the roof. And as I'm standing on the roof of my car, mind you, it's a Ford Taurus, it's no little car. I stand on the roof and the water is literally up to my knees. That's how high the water was. And so anyway, we're hunkered down still in the apartment. It's now been, like a full day. We're just hunkered down. And now all of a sudden there's like a government forming in the building. Maybe there's a few hundred people in the building and there's a government forming. And then by day 2, all of a sudden we start seeing some helicopters now. Now, mind you, the whole time we're still listening to the radio because the radio is still broadcasting. And they're talking about all this crazy stuff like, oh, they're going to start sending in cruise ships to save people. And we're going to get people out in cruise ships, or there's going to be helicopters. They're going to be picking up people and bringing them out of the city. And all these like big stories. But as we just sat and waited. And then at one point they get on and they're like, hey, by the way, Winn-Dixie, the owners of Winn-Dixie said, if you guys need stuff, go ahead and get into Winn-Dixie and take what you need. That's all, it's a loss anyway. Go ahead and just take what you need. Mind you, they said this, but also on the news, they said, oh, there's looting going on. Well, yeah, there was looting going on, but these businesses said it was okay. Like literally, at one point, they got on the radio and they said, hey, listen, if you guys need stuff, go get what you need, because ain't nobody was coming. There was nobody for like 2.5 days. Nobody, no police, no military, nobody, not a rescuer in sight. And we're just on our own. Mind you, after a hurricane, the heat gets up to 110, 115 with some serious humidity. And you ain't got no air conditioning. And you ain't got no ice. And you ain't got no cold water. You ain't got no running water, period. Which means the toilets ain't running. Which means you're basically on an island with zero resources. So me and my cousin Nick, we get in the water and we swam to Winn-Dixie, which was about a half mile down the road. And we get to Winn-Dixie, we go in, the doors have been smashed out, and we're kind of trudging through like waist deep water through Winn-Dixie, mind you. Now, also, you could only get to the top shelves of the grocery store. And so anyway, we're filling up baskets, right? What we had done was we got like these, those foam coolers that you take camping with you? Those things float. So we grabbed some foam coolers and we started stuffing them with food. And I remember at one point, my cousin Nick comes out with a whole ham and he's so proud of himself. He's like, dude, I found a whole ham. I'm like, dude, you can't eat that shit. Like, that's literally like been sitting in the heat in this funky water for like a day and a half. There's no way we're eating a day and a half old ham that's been sitting in 110-degree heat. But he was so damn proud of himself when he grabbed that ham. So we stock up with canned goods and bread and stuff like that. And I actually was thinking ahead, so I grabbed a few cartons of butts. At the time, I think I grabbed like a fifth of something, a Crown or whatever. And then I grabbed a couple disposable cameras. Mind you, those disposable cameras came in handy. And actually, in a couple minutes, I'm going to break out some of those photos that I took during Hurricane Katrina, because that was pretty wild. But anyway, so I get a couple disposable cameras because I needed to record this. I was also journaling everything that was going on the whole time as well. So we go back to my aunt's apartment building, and anyway, at one point, helicopters started showing up. By the way, I apologize. I'm sort of like glazing over a lot of stuff, but I'm just trying to get to the big points because so much happened in between. We could literally be here for hours, but I'm just kind of getting to the facts and stuff. So helicopters start showing up. We're sort of like convening on the roof at one point. And mind you, this government that was kind of created in the building was sort of like on the roof waiting for supplies so that they could divvy it up between all the people in the building. So all of a sudden, the helicopters are over us, and they're dropping cases of water from the helicopters. And they're dropping them so high that they're just fucking bursting on the roof, right? And we're like, dude, lower them down in a basket. You know what I mean? Like, we're over here parched as shit. You're just dumping water all over the roof, you know? Like there's nothing to drink, you know? Like, we're going to go lick it off the roof. You know, what's going on here? So finally they figure out, we're going to lower it down. So they lower the water down and stuff. And then they're dropping cases of MREs. And at one point, my aunt's boyfriend says, hey, Derek, go grab one of them cases. So I grab a case thinking, hey, we're going to divvy it up. He says, hey, take that down to the apartment building, you know, to our apartment, and put it in there. We're going to keep that for us. And I said, wait a minute. No, they're dividing it up between everybody. We can't just take a whole case of MREs just for us. And he's like, Derek, do what I told you to do. Now, mind you, there's stairwells all the way down to the apartment. And I would have to then walk by hundreds of people waiting for food with a case of MREs that I just basically stole to bring down to the apartment. Mind you, he would not do this himself. He was going to have me, a 21-year-old kid, do it for him. So I look at him and I say, dude, I'm not doing this. And we got into it. And it was at that point that they said, look, you're out. You got to leave. You can't be in the apartment anymore. And we're going to also tell the head of this thing that you were the one that wanted to steal the MREs. So they were basically going to blackball me and get me kicked out of the building. So I said, I'm just going to leave. I'm gone. So I says to my grandmother, I said, Grandma, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to find something and I'm going to come back for you. So I pack my bag and I take my little foam cooler and I start swimming. And I made it to a little bayou that had been formed by the Mid-City Post Office. And there's literally hundreds of people gathered up on this little strip of land by the post office. And they were all sleeping outside of the post office. So I get there and I'm like, hey, we're going to break into the post office and I'm going to have everyone sleep inside. So so I break in with me and a couple other guys that I had met there. We broke into the post office and everyone's convening in. There's pregnant women and children, and we're all kind of stacked inside this post office. But after about 30 minutes, everyone's complaining of this smell, like this really bad rancid smell. And so me and a couple of guys said, hey, let's walk around the building and see where the smell's coming from. So we walked to the other side of the building, and apparently the rescuers had painted this big orange circle on the low part of the roof behind the post office. And they were just stacking bodies that they found in that spot for people to pick up so they could dispose of them. or do whatever they do with them. I don't know. But I realized this was our shelter, and we had women and children, pregnant women and all that in the building. So we said, we have to do something about this. So me and those guys took the bodies one by one, and we carried them to the other side of the water and dropped them on the other side, so that they'd be away from the building. Yeah, that's what happened. So we slept in the building that night. The next day I woke up and I just see a boat sitting on the side of the water. No one claimed it. So I get in the boat and I pull a street sign out of the ground and I paddled my way back to the building. And we get there and I go inside and I go up to my aunt's apartment, go to get my grandmother, and I go in and everyone's gone. There's like no one left. They all got rescued. Yeah, my friggin' luck, right? So everyone's rescued. And I'm this 21-year-old kid now by myself in New Orleans, right? So as I'm leaving, I see couple women with a cat down by the parking garage. And I say, hey, you guys want to get in and get out of here? And they're like, sure. So they get in the boat, and I realize the three of us aren't going to make it all the way back, with me in the boat. So I jump in the water and I pull the boat to the post office, and we go there. And now at this point, they have helicopters picking people up and bringing them out, but they're only taking like 10 people at a time. So it was slow moving. And so at one point we realized, like, hey, this is going to take a lot longer than we thought. So I go up to the military guy and I say, hey, listen, this is my wife and she's pregnant and we got to get on the helicopter. And they go, we'll get you on the next one. Now, mind you, I was being dishonest. But you know what? When you're in that situation and you're a bunch of young kids, you have to do what you have to do, right? So we get on the helicopter. First time ever on a helicopter, by the way. By the way, they don't have a door on the side of the helicopter. It's just this gaping hole, right? So we're all like in the helicopter, not strapped in or anything. Just in the helicopter. If that thing tilted, we would have just, But we get up in the air and we're looking out at the city as we're flying. And it was at that moment I realized, like, holy shit, like this is way bigger than we ever thought it would be. This is crazy. And at that point, something had crossed my mind. I thought, I think all of America got destroyed by this hurricane. Because I couldn't justify, like, how is it that we've been out here for this many days and they're just now sending in help? The whole country must have been destroyed. And as we were up in the air looking at the city, like, it appeared that way to us. Like, we really thought, like, we don't have a country anymore. So at that moment, we're in the air, we're thinking, oh, they're taking us out of the city. Nope. They bring us to the interstate where they're literally just hurling, or whatever the word is. They're stacking like thousands of us on the side of the interstate behind like riot gates and stuff. And I think they gave us like 10 porta potties, and there must have been 2, 3, 5,000 people. Not enough porta potties. Mind you, they weren't cleaning the porta potties. So people were literally just going to the bathroom where they stood, or they'd go around a tree or something. So like if you went near a tree, it was usually filled with poop and pee and whatever else. And if you could find a clean area that didn't have poop, pee, and whatever else, that's where you slept. And you would just sleep on the ground. On the ground. Luckily, I had a backpack, so that was my pillow. But yeah, on the ground. Surrounded by poop, pee, and trash. And whatever else was out there. Yeah, that's what was happening. And There were buses kind of lined up coming into the city, but they were slow moving. Slow in, slow out. Slow in, slow out. There didn't seem to be any organization. Also, they weren't really handing out supplies or anything. There was no food vendors or any supplies being handed out to anybody. Literally, you were just out there. That's it. You're just there. There were police, there were military, but they were on the other side of the gates, and you were inside the gates. And they didn't come into your side. So that was interesting. At one point, we an Air Force One helicopter started coming above, and everyone's like, "Oh, I think that's George Bush." So all of a sudden, everyone starts hurling their canned goods up at the helicopter. They had to fly out of there. Also, there were news people. So this news guy actually came up and goes, "Hey, can we interview you?" I said, "Sure, yeah." I go, "I'll tell you what, I'll do your little interview if you could bring me like a bottle of water and something to eat." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I got you, man. I got you. We got stuff back in the van." So he interviews me, and I sat there for like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. That dude never came back. Fuck the media, right? Anyway, so at one point, me and those girls that I had rescued out of the building, we there was a hotel on the other side, and we got into the hotel, and we get into a clean room, and there was a clean toilet. It was like, holy smokes, this is our first clean toilet we've seen in days, and mind you, it wouldn't flush. So after a couple uses, it was no longer clean, but at least it was clean that first time. So we get in the room. We finally got a little sleep. And we wake up and we're like, hey, we got to get supplies. We need to clean ourselves, like put some clean clothes on or something, because we've been in this water. We've been, we're covered in just, it was gross. So we get in this maid closet, right? And we're rummaging around looking for clothes, whatever supplies we can find. And there's this like lost and found bucket. So I go in the lost and found bucket, and I found like a T-shirt, and in there was a bottle of cologne. I pull it out, and it's a freaking bottle of Acqua di Gio. Now, I had heard of Acqua di Gio, but I never had Acqua di Gio money, right? So I'm like, holy smoke, someone left behind a whole bottle of Acqua di Gio. I had never smelled it before. So as I'm rummaging through, I grab this bottle of Acqua di Gio, and I pull the cap off, and I smell it, and I close my eyes. And immediately, I wasn't in New Orleans. I wasn't surrounded by everything going on. I was safe. I was not full of adrenaline. A calm came over me. And for some reason, I knew I was going to make it out of there. And that was the day I fell in love with fragrance. And as we leave the closet, we get out and we close the door. And the girl says, "Oh no, my cat." And we realized the cat was still in the maid's closet. And we go to open the door, and it's one of those electronic doors, with a key lock, a card lock. And we realize there's no way we can get into this door. So after about an hour of trying to get in, we realized we had to leave the cab. A few hours later, the police come in and they go, "Hey, you guys got to get out of this building." So we go back on the interstate and we're waiting. And at one point, the girls go off and they try to get on the buses. They're waiting in the crowds of people trying to get on buses. And at that point, my ankles had swollen 4 times the size of that they were normally. I had been eaten by bayou bugs and whatever else. And I was just, I didn't know it, but I was going septic. And I had no energy. I had no strength to even stand for more than 2 minutes. So with my last bit of strength, I started walking toward the crowd. And as I'm walking, I step on something and it yelps. And I look down and it's this little yellow shaggy dog. So I reach down and I pick him up. And I carried him over to the tree where I had been staying in. I had a bottle of water and he's whimpering and he has a huge gash in his side and his legs are mangled. And I tried to give him some water and he got a little bit down and then he started vomiting. And when he vomited, it was a combination of mud and blood, and the contents of his stomach. And so one night I stayed up with him and I tried feeding him, getting him a drink, and he just wouldn't. And all he did was cry all night. So in the morning, I walked up and there was a police car on the other side of the gate. And I said to the police officer, I said, "I have this dog." I said, can one of you guys put him down? And they said, "We can't open fire out here. You know, it would cause a scene." They said, "You're going to have to handle it." I'm 21 years old. I have this suffering animal. So I walked out behind the bridge and I laid him down and I took my shirt off. I laid it over. I picked up a rock. And when it was done, I went back to the tree and I fell asleep. And I remember closing my eyes and I prayed and I said, "God, I don't care what happens to me. Just let my parents know that I'm okay. Let them know where I am. Let them find my body." And then I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I was on a bus. No idea how I got there. No memory of it. I was on a bus. And I looked out and I could see the crowd of people clamoring to get on buses. And this feeling of guilt came over me. Like, why am I on this bus and they're not? And there was this little elderly black lady sitting next to me, and she just looked at me with tears in her eyes. And she grabbed my hand, and I grabbed hers. And And she just said, "It's going to be okay." And then we started driving. And about an hour goes by. And I walked up to the driver and I said, "Where are we going?" And he says, "I don't know. A lot of these hounds don't want us. So we have to drive until someone says that we can stop." So we drove and drove and drove. And then at some point we got into the border of Texas. And they stopped at this gas station. And we get out. Mind you, I have no money. I have nothing. And we get out, and everyone goes in the gas station to get whatever supplies or anything. And I go in, and I'm like, I'm thirsty. And they had this table set up with all these little plastic cups filled with ice. And they were charging $1 for a cup of ice. So I took a few of them. I had no money. I just walked out with them. And the guy goes, hey. And I said, call the police. Have them come arrest me, please. I dare you. Find a judge anywhere that's going to prosecute me. I welcome it. Bring it on. So I walk out with my ice, and I go to a payphone, and I called my mom. And I said, I get on the phone. I said, "Mom, I'm out of the city. I'm going somewhere. I don't know where, but I'll call you when I get there." So then we end up driving more, and we get into this, I don't know what it was, like a highway parking, whatever. And they had a bunch of people lined up that were helping, what we've now called the refugees. We were labeled refugees. And we get out, and there's people with like sandwiches and just giving out clothes and whatever. And the first thing I did when I got off the bus is this man comes up to me and he goes, "Can I pray with you?" And I said, "Sure." So he leans over and he says a prayer, and I said, "Thank you." And then this other man comes up to me and he says, "Can I give you a fresh pair of socks?" And I look at him, I'm like, "Absolutely." So he says, "Come here, sit down." So I sit down, and he goes, your feet are swollen." He goes, "I think I'm going to have to cut your shoes off." I said, "Okay." So he grabs scissors and he cuts my shoes off, and he peels my socks off my feet. And he had a bucket of soapy water, and he washed my feet. And then he put a fresh pair of socks on my feet. And yeah, that was a powerful moment. And so anyway, by the way, I love Texas. I love the people in Texas. What they did for us, I'll never forget. So we end up driving, and finally we stop in this little town, and this little community, literally of like a couple thousand people. And they basically opened up their Boy Scout camp and had set it up as a refugee camp for us. So we're like, there's a community shower and everything, and everyone's showering. And I go and I pick up an outfit from the clothes that were donated. And this woman comes up to me and she says, "Hey, would you like to come home with us?" I said, "Sure, yeah, absolutely." So she gets us in the car, and she's like, "Oh, we're volunteering, and we wanted to take a couple people home to our home. We have a couple spare bedrooms, and we thought we could give you a place." She goes, "Do you have a place to go?" I said, "Yeah, my parents bought me a ticket to get back to New Hampshire." So they're like, "I have to get to Houston." And he goes, "Well, there's we can get you down to Dallas, and then from Dallas you could take a plane to Houston." So I spent the night in their house. They took me to a restaurant, bought me a steak dinner, and the next morning, the man drove me 3 hours to the airport to get on a plane to fly down to Houston, where I met up with my grandmother, and we ended up flying back to New Hampshire together. And I remember we landed in the airport in Boston. And up until that point, I hadn't slept. I was filled with adrenaline. It had been just go, 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 survive, survive, survive. So I remember I'm walking out the gate, and I walk into the airport, and I see my parents. And the moment I see them, all the adrenaline, all the life force just drained out of me. And I immediately collapsed. And for the first time, the entire time I was in New Orleans, I cried. And my parents embraced me, and I was finally safe. From the day the storm hit until the day I got back to New Orleans was 10 days. 10 days. From the night that the storm hit until I was back home. 10 days. I was 21. I'll never forget that. But now I wanted to share with you some of the photos that I took while I was there. So I made this little video, and I want to share it with you now. So these are some of the photos that I took while I was in New Orleans. I wanted to share this story with you because not only was it during this tragedy that I discovered my passion and my love for a fragrance and what it can do to transport you to a completely different place, but to show you that even in the most tragic times of your life, that there is hope. There's always going to be a future. There's always going to be a tomorrow. And God will get you through. And for those that didn't make it, I live every day carrying your memory. My hope is that no one ever forgets what happened. And that my prayer is that as a country we don't repeat, even though we have. And I feel that we will again. But hopefully, over time, we get a little better. We get a little better. The government failed us. But the people, the Americans, our brothers and sisters, didn't fail us. They were there for us. They prayed with me. They washed my feet. They bought me a steak dinner and they gave me a bed. They gave me clothes and a fresh pair of socks. They showed up. They cleaned up. They stood shoulder to shoulder with us and cried with us. America is an amazing country filled with amazing people. If you hate this country is not something to be hated. You may hate the institutions. You may hate the government. You may hate the processes, the red tape, all of it. But the people, all of you, are what makes this country amazing. And this really is the land of opportunity, because I would not be sitting here speaking to you tonight, telling you this story in my beautiful home at the age of 40, if it wasn't for the opportunities that this country gave me. And for all of those that helped when no one else would. Hopefully you take something from this. I love you all. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you guys for joining in. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and an even better week. Thank you. This has been a Fragrant Mind podcast. Be sure to visit afragrantstateofmind.com or subscribe to AFSOM on YouTube. As always, have a fragrant state of mind.